This section really only has two things in it. It has estimation, in other words, does something make sense? Can you look at it and figure out something that's close to an answer? And actually solving presents accurately. So the first thing that we're going to look at, and we're just going to talk just a little bit, just chat about this a little bit and make sure that you understand it in your head. But when we talk about percentages, there are certain percentages that are just nice percentages, and they're used a lot when maybe you go to a store and they're doing a sale or something like that. And one is 10%, one is 25%, 33 1/3%, and one is 50%. And all of these numbers will go into 100 evenly. So when you're talking about 10% of something, if you divide 10 into it, that tells you the number that is the percentage. So for instance, let's say I wanted to find 10% of 50. I would just say 50 divided by 10, and 50 divided by 10 is 5, so 5 is 10% of 50. That would give us that number. If I wanted to do 25%, think about money. A quarter, if you look at money in terms of a quarter versus a dollar, there are 4 quarters in a dollar. So if you're using 25%, you would divide by 4. If you're using 33 1/3%, you would divide by 3. And 50% is half, so you would divide by 2. So you can look at these numbers and just figure out the percentage just by doing some quick math in your head. So let's look at these examples. 50% of 800. So half of 800, 2 into 800 would be 400. So 50% of 800 would be 400. 33 1/3% of 600. 3 into 600. 3 goes into 6 twice, so that would be 200. So 33 1/3% of 600 would be 200. 25% of 1200. 4 times, so 4 into 1200, 4 goes into 12, 3 times, so this would be 300. 10% of 82.4, 10 goes into 824, 82.4 times, so 10% would be 82.4. And that's all you're doing. You're taking these numbers, and if it's 50%, you divide by 2, 33 1/3%, you divide by 3, 25% you divide by 4, and 10% you divide by 10, just to get a quick estimate. That's all you're doing. And these are nice, pretty numbers that are divisible really easily, but sometimes they're not, and you can still get a nice estimate of what's going on simply by just changing it to a number that's close to it. So for instance, 4 is not going to go evenly into 312, but if you know your times tables, you know that 4 will go into 32. So if I estimated this, I could say, well, 312 is pretty close to 320, so I could divide 4 into 320, and that would go 80 times. So 25% of 312 is something that's close to 80. So we're just trying to get something that's close to it. We're not trying to get exact answers. We're just trying to estimate a little bit. I can look at this one, and I can say, well, 50% of 843, half of something that will go evenly, I could use 844 to give it to me, because 2 into 844, 2 into 8 would go 4, 2 into 4 would go 2, 2 into another 4 would go 2, so that would give me a good estimate of it. I don't have to have the exact answer if I'm just trying to get something close to it. This is simply for estimation purposes. So you just need to remember that you're dividing by 4 if it's 25%, 3 if it's 33 1/3%, 2 if it's 50%, and 10 if it's 10%. So that's how you're going to do your estimation. Now, we actually do have some problems where we're trying to get accurate answers on these. And we're going to use what I like to call a template for these. And your book has this template. This is actually on page, let's find it here. Let's see, these problems are on page 192 in your book. And the template says that A, this is the given amount, is P%, which is the percent, of W, and W is the whole quantity. It always comes after the word of. So what you want to do is you want to write all of your percent problems, even if they're in a paragraph, you want to narrow them down to this one sentence and give yourself the given amount, the percent, and the whole. And you want to try to identify the percent first because it's going to be the easy one. It's going to have either the word percent or a percent sign after it. So let's take a look at some of these problems. This problem says, what number is 18% of 200? And you're going to use a formula for all of these, and the formula is this one. P over 100 equals A over W. And notice this is a proportion if we write it this way. So when we look at our sentence, what number is 18% of 200? What we want to do is we want to be able to label the pieces of our problem. So when we're looking at this one, it's really easy to identify the percentage first. So if I'm looking at that one, 18% would be the percentage. So if I were just looking at this problem, I would just take my pencil and I would write a P over the top of that 18. And then you need to ask yourself, what's the whole thing? Well, if I'm saying what number is 18% of 200, 200 is the whole thing that I could possibly be talking about. And notice it comes after the word of. That's what the directions we're talking about. So this would be your W. The only other thing left is the what number. So that's the amount. That's the A, and that's the part that's missing. So if we have our formula here that they're giving us, and if you want to refer to this is actually back on page 192 in your book. So this is our formula. So we just plug the numbers in. P is 18 over 100. We don't know A, so we leave it blank with just the A. We do need a W. And now this looks just like the problems we did before. 18 times 200, so 18 times 2 is 36, so this would be 3600 equals 100A, and divide both sides by 100. Use your calculator if you have trouble with it. So my answer would be A is 36. So this is saying that 36 is 18% of 200. And it's very simple. That's all we're doing. We're taking those and we're trying to fill in our formula. That's what we're doing. So let's take a look at some of these problems and just go through them. Let's see. Let's look at page 196. That's what we're looking at. So let's see. Let's pull up a whiteboard for us to look at. Now let's just take a look at some of these problems. If we're looking at the problems on page 196, let's look at starting with number 9 first. Those are the ones where you're estimating. So if I was looking at number 10, since that's an even one, I'm doing the even ones with you so that you're doing the odd ones on your own since you have those answers. But number 10 says 25% of 415. Now 25% is the one if we were trying to estimate that we would divide by 4. 4 is not going into this evenly, but you know 4 goes into 400. So 400 is pretty close to 415. 4 goes into 420. So you could use 400, you could use 420. So I'm going to use 420. And I'm going to divide 4 into 420 because I know that that goes evenly. So I'm getting 105. So 25% of 415 is somewhere close to 105. So you can get a nice estimate. Just remember that if you're looking at 25%, you divide by 4. 10%, you divide by 10. 50%, you divide by 2. And 10%, you divide by 10. So let's see. Let's take a look at the next kind of problem. So let's take a look at number 22. It says, what number is 120% of 16? And remember, we're trying to fit a template here of P over 100 equals A over W. So we need to figure out what those numbers are. This one has the percent sign, so that's your P. There's the word of, so 16 is your whole. So we have 120 over 100. We don't have an A. We do have a whole. And you know, this now is just a matter of cross multiplying. So you would say A times 100 is 100A. And 120 times 16, get out the calculator, and we would get 1920. Divide both sides by 100. And so A would be equal to 19.2. And that would be my answer to this one. So that would be my answer to that one. Let's see. Let's look at another one that has them in a different order. How about we look at number 24. 40% of what number is 60? So we've got our little template. We need to find our numbers that go in there. 40% is going to be my P. Find the word of. That's going to be your whole. We don't know what that is, so we leave it. And then there's your 60. So 40 times W, 100 times 60, divide by 40. Take out my trusty calculator, so 6,000 divided by 40 comes out to 150. So that would be my answer on that one. Let's do one that has a percent, because that one is a little different. So let's look at number 28. 28 says, what percent? So notice this one's actually asking for the percent of 12 is 9. Now, since this one's asking for the percent, as long as you follow the template, you will still get the right answer. So just be careful on this one. What percent? We don't know what that is, so we're going to leave the P. Of 12. So 12 is the W, and 9 is the A. We're going to cross multiply. So we're going to take that and divide both sides by 12. So 900 divided by 12 comes out to 75%. So my answer is 75%. So just be careful and make sure that you're following the template. Now, let's take a look at some of the actual word problems that are here. Let's look at number 38. We have our little template that we had for this. In fact, we can go back and look at that. It's on page, if you have your book there. Remember, you should always have your book when you're listening to your lecture videos. But your template says A is P% of W. So what you want to do in the word problems is you want to write each word problem into that template. So if I'm looking at number 38, it says 50% of American men are shorter than 5'9", and the directions say in 2010 it is estimated that there are 230 million American adults. Estimate the numbers indicated in problems 37 through 44. So this one is a word problem that is estimation. And the reason that we know it's estimation is because it actually says in the directions, estimate the numbers indicated, which if you notice, all these things are going to be easy things that you can divide. So if we're doing 50%, we would do half of American men. If we look over here and we see that We need to look at problem number 37 to find American men, because that's what it tells us. It says 50% of American adults are men. So in this one, 230 million American adults. 50% of 230 million, if I divide 230 by 2, I get 115 million. And then 50% of that, so 115 divided by 2, would be 57.5 million. So you can do your estimate on that. You might not get the exact answer, especially if instead of using 115, I round it to 116 million so that I get something that's nice and pretty. So these word problems in this section will be estimation. And then you're going to get to some that actually are no longer estimation. So let's see. They said to do that in 37 through 44. So after we get past 44, we have some that are no longer estimation. So let's look at number 46. It says if 10.2% of the 230 million adult Americans are unemployed, how many adult Americans are unemployed? So I need to be able to write my sentence. So the first thing I need to decide is, what is the whole in this problem? I mean, I'm looking at two things here. I'm looking at adult Americans and I'm looking at the unemployed. The unemployed is a subset of the whole group of Americans. So you're looking for the whole group first, which means that 230 million is the whole group. It would make sense to say that the unemployed is the whole group. You have to figure that out first. You've got the 10.2%, and you're trying to figure out the piece would be the unemployed. So unemployed people is what we're talking about for the amount here. So this is our template. That means that the unemployed is A, 10.2 is the percent, and 230 million is the W. So all we have to do now is fit it into our template and do the math. The hard part is going to be figuring out what's the whole, what's the percentage. Just remember that you're looking to see which group this one comes from. This is the one that comes from the whole. So that's what you're looking for. So you would take 10.2 over 100. We don't know the unemployed. We do know this. And as long as we remember at the end that our answer is going to be in millions, we don't need to write this is the number of millions. We could put 230 with 6 zeros if we wanted to, or we could just remember when we get finished to write our answer in millions. So 10.2 times 230 is 2346. 100 times A is 100A. Divide by 100. So if I divide 2346 by 100, I get 23.46 million, because my answer is in million, Americans are unemployed. So that's how we're going to use this. You're going to take all the problems that you see and you're going to fit them to this template. So what you want to do is pause the video now and try to do some of these odd problems in the book before you do the WebAssign assignment. Remember, the WebAssign is for a grade. The ones in the book you have the answers to so that you can practice before you do the WebAssign assignment.